Welcome to this Economist virtual event, whose subject is the EU Recovery and Resilience Fund and Croatia's transition. My name is Joan Hoey. I'm the Director for Europe at the Economist Intelligence Unit, and my co-chair today is Agnese Ortolani, who is a senior analyst and specialist in EU policy affairs at the Economist Intelligence Unit. So today we'll be discussing the recovery and growth outlook for Croatia after the COVID-19 pandemic, and we'll have a particular focus on the EU Recovery and Resilience Fund. The Prime Minister of Croatia will shortly give the official opening address, but Agnese, let me ask you to share the view from the Economist Intelligence Unit about the outlook for Croatia, just to set the scene for today's discussions. So the first question is, what is the situation right now in Croatia regarding the pandemic? Is the worst over?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Yes, so Croatia is currently suffering from a prolonged second wave of the coronavirus pandemic. And now the number of daily cases picked up since early March to around 900 daily new cases on average over the last week, but remains well below the peak in mid-December of around 3,600 cases per average. There are some social restrictions in place, including like a limited number of people gatherings and restrictions of border crossing and also special business operating hours. And these are set to remain in place until the end of March, and we expect most of them to be extended and to be lifted only by May, allowing economic activity to start rebounding by then. And furthermore, we don't expect a widespread rollout of COVID vaccine to around 70% of the population until the end of this year at the earliest, which will hamper the economic recovery.
Oh, thanks. So what do we expect in terms of the economic rebound in 2021? Obviously, Croatia had quite a deep recession in 2020. So what's on the horizon this year?
Yeah, exactly. So real GDP contracted by 8.4% last year, down from 2.9% in 2019. And we expect a growth of 4% this year, essentially on the back of a rebound in both domestic and foreign demand. But still, domestic demand will remain subdued in the early months of this year, as some restriction, as I just said, will remain in place. But then a gradual reopening of the economy will provide a boost to consumption and investment, especially in the second half of the year. The recovery this year will only be partial as the tourism sector continue to suffer, and the rebound will also largely depend on the spread of the coronavirus, on the vaccination dynamics, and in particular potential travel restrictions as well that they might impact the tourism sector, which is an important driver of Croatia's economy. And the relative weak performance this year is also linked to the fact that Croatia is strong link with the Eurozone. And additionally, we don't expect the EU recovery fund to materialize until early this year or early 2022, which will further hold back the economic recovery.
Okay, so in terms of the funds, and of course, Croatia is a big recipient here of the EU recovery funds. I believe that 22 billion euros is coming Croatia's way potentially in terms of development funds in 2021 to 2027. So you're saying that we shouldn't expect to see the benefits of that really this year, or at least not until later this year. But what about over the medium term? What impact do you think these funds will have?
Well, over the medium term, the potential boost to the economy from the EU recovery funds is considerable, as Croatia, as you said, is among the biggest beneficiaries, net beneficiary, especially of EU funding as a share of GDP in 2021-2027. So Croatia, the EU funding for Croatia is set to roughly double over the next budget period to about over 22 billion euros. The regular EU budget will be supplemented by the post-pandemic recovery fund. So Croatia is set to receive over 6 billion in net direct fiscal transfers, and the EU funded like a public investment program could increase potential growth considerably, but then its effectiveness will depend on the country's absorption capacity and also whether the fund is directed towards productive investment and activities.
Okay, thanks. So that's very useful. I've received a message that the Prime Minister is running a little late, so I think that gives us an opportunity, Agnese, to carry on our conversation, and we'll wait for the Prime Minister to join us to give the official address. So, I mean, just following up a few points from what you've just said, I think the Croatia is in the same position, obviously, as many others in the region, and a lot of what happens this year is contingent on the vaccine rollout. So maybe we can talk a little bit about what's happening with that, and indeed what's gone wrong, it seems, in the EU, where we were expecting some people were expecting a much faster rollout. So the EU seems to have run into all sorts of problems with the rollout. Can you just maybe give us a kind of recap of what's happened so far and what our expectation is for the remainder of the year?
Yes. So essentially, what happens in the rest of Europe, and especially in the Eurozone, is very important for Croatia economy, as we know, like Croatia main trade partner, for instance, is Italy, who is currently like suffering from a third wave of the pandemic. And as you said, the risk now with the rollout of the vaccine in the Eurozone in particular is that it has been particularly slow, which means that now most countries such as France and Italy, they are struggling to contain this new spike in cases because of the essentially the vaccination pace has been very slow so far. This has been due to a combination of reasons. Of course, the centralized procurement system of the European Union hasn't helped and has delayed quite substantially. But then we had some supply issues, especially in the first month of the year, which meant that several countries had to stop the rollout of several vaccines. And then we also had some like political decisions that had been taken around, for example, the rollout of the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine, and a combination of this, and also linked with some bottlenecks in terms of the distributions in several countries, and also delays in terms of the elaboration of the vaccine strategies, and also the rollout, as could essentially Europe to be most countries in the EU to be particularly slow, especially compared to the UK and the US. And this overall is probably one of the biggest risks that we see for the growth outlook in the Eurozone this year, as especially if the country do not manage to hit the target of vaccinated around 70% of the population by the end of the summer, this is going to present serious risk for the autumn when normally with the colder temperature, so we might see another spike in cases if the rollout hasn't proceeded as expected. And if we consider the current numbers of the rollout of vaccines, especially in countries like Italy, France, but even Germany, essentially all these countries will have to vaccinate 3 times what they are doing today to hit the targets by the end of the year. We don't believe this is impossible because, of course, most of the supplies, we expect a spike in supplies in the second quarter of the year, but still it relies a lot on the distribution mechanism as well, on vaccine skepticism as a risk in countries like France, for instance. And so it is definitely one of the most serious risks to the growth outlook in the Eurozone this year.
Well, thanks very much for that, Agnese.